Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Namaskar. You have stepped into a course that is going to change the way that you look at data. Not just how you analyze it, but also how you communicate it. My name is Nivid Desai. I serve as the Program Executive at Writing Studio IIT Gandhinagar. Welcome to Writing for Data Science. This course is at the intersection of analysis and communication. As all of us know, data analysis is not just about coding and models. It is about solving real-world problems. And that is exactly why every single thought that goes into solving those problems needs to be communicated. And not just to one audience, across multiple stakeholders. That is where this course comes in. This course prepares you with the foundations of writing, especially curated for data science. We will discuss audience analysis, critical thinking, logical reasoning, as well as storytelling that is native to data science. So join me on a journey at the intersection of numbers and narratives. I'll see you in class. Namaskar, hello and welcome to Writing for Data Science. My name is Nivid Desai and we are on a journey of exploring this interesting intersection between numbers and narratives. In the last class, we looked at three core qualities that our writing must reflect to become as effective as possible in the realm of data science: clarity, conciseness, and precision. In today's class, we will build on that knowledge to encounter a whole new approach known as reader-centric writing. If you think about it, we have been building towards this approach in a piecemeal manner throughout our previous lectures. We have been slowly gaining the empathy of understanding what our reader wants, what are their curiosities, what are their levels of proficiency, and how can we adjust our message to fit the kind of curiosities that they bring to the table. But in today's lecture, I want to introduce this entire philosophy as a concept to you, known as reader-centric writing. We will discuss what are the values, what is the importance, and how to actually do this in practice in this one and the next few lectures. But before we go into the depths, let me first introduce you to what we mean as a concept when we say the words reader-centric writing. What is reader-centric writing? Reader-centric writing is an approach that prioritizes the needs, expectations, and understanding of the reader over the preferences or habits of the writer. This is a philosophy that puts the reader at the center of the communication. It focuses on making communication accessible, relevant, and actionable for the intended audience. Let's draw a parallel. Unlike writer-centric writing, which focuses on what the writer knows or what they want to say, reader-centric writing asks, what does my audience need to know? What level of detail is appropriate for them? How can I make this information easy for them to use? If you think about it, we drew a parallel on this a few lectures ago, where we talked about how UI and UX may appear as user interface and user experience. Writing is more about optimizing for RI and RX, reader interface and reader experience. And that's where this particular philosophy is born, reader-centric writing. In our academic understanding, we have also prioritized a first principles approach, if you remember. So I also want to introduce a first principles approach of reader-centric writing. We will look at some principles that make up this entire philosophy and make it worth practicing for you and your reader. Let's look at the first principle. Writing is a tool for the reader, not a record for the writer. Think about this for a moment. Writing is a tool to access information for the intended reader whom we are writing for. It is not a record for us to show how much we know. Good writing exists to help someone else understand, not just to show what you, the writer, know. It is not a record of your knowledge. It is not a record of your intellect. If you do not do that, the reader will lose interest, they will feel unacknowledged, and very likely they will not pick up something that you have written in the future. In data science particularly, this means shifting the focus from complex model descriptions to meaningful insights and their implications. We have dealt with this at a thematic level in the past lectures as well, but I would like you to now think about this as a temperament of writing, as a quality, a core quality of writing that we must optimize for every time that we are making a creative or a technical decision to design our communication to suit our readers' needs. It is not a record of everything we know. It is a tool for the reader to access everything we know. Therefore, it becomes incredibly important that we design this tool for easy access for the reader, not for a self-sustaining and self-assuring exercise for us, the writers. Let's look at an example of a writer-centric sentence versus a reader-centric sentence, so to say. Let's look at the example of a writer-centric sentence first. We used gradient-boosted trees with hyperparameter tuning. This is more augmented towards what the writer knows than what the reader wants to know. I hope we can see the difference. The assumptions of what these words might mean, the assumption of the underlying process, the assumption of maybe the audience will catch up with what I mean to say. All of this is calculated wrongly. Because in this case, the writer is making connections in their own mind and putting it down on paper without recognizing whether the audience and the reader would like to receive it in this manner. This is writer-centric writing, something that I don't personally recommend that you do. So what should you do? That's where a reader-centric approach comes to be. Let's look at the same sentence and the same message augmented for reader-centric qualities. We used a machine learning model that improved prediction accuracy by 15%. It's again communicating the same idea, but more augmented towards what the reader would require more than a record of what the writer knows. Therefore, a reader-centric quality is essential to ensure that your reader feels acknowledged and their needs are fulfilled by the document that you have created. And their experience is not hampered by your misaligned assumptions and your misaligned priorities to declare to the world just how much you know and ignore what the reader actually wants to know. Let's do a little exercise to understand this better. Take this sentence and make it reader-centric. The dataset was filtered using an IQR method before applying PCA. Try to look up these terms if you are not familiar with them. Try to look up these terms, try to understand their meaning, and break them into first principles to make it reader-centric. In this case, you get to decide who the reader is, so use your creativity, assign a role to the reader, assign a level of proficiency to the reader, and try to convert it into something more reader-centric, something more reader-friendly. I will get back to you with the second principle in a moment. The first principle of reader-centric writing was very well along the lines of what we have already discussed. However, the second principle introduces a new perspective, and I would like to spend some time discussing this as an approach in much depth. The second principle talks about anticipating the reader's questions. What do I mean by that? All writing, especially technical, especially in data science, all writing hinges upon the fact that the reader wants to know something. The reader has an appetite for information, a hunger for knowledge. Therefore, it automatically follows in the logic that they might have some questions, right? They might not voice those questions, but they will have some questions subliminally. I mean, in their mind, at a deeper layer. They will have some curiosities directed towards the topic that you are writing about. So, when you are thinking about your likely reader, your intended target audience, a good approach to keep in mind would be, what kind of questions would they have? What kind of curiosities would arise in their mind that I should address in my writing? These are some of the curiosities that arise first, commonly, across both technical and non-technical audiences. Let's look at them and let's discuss all of them in some brief detail. Number one, an existential question. Why should I care? Why should I care about what is on this piece of paper? Is there enough reason for me to have a stake in the information being catered to me? Is there enough reason for me to pay attention to it? Does it make a dent in my professional life? All of this justifies the existence of the information that you have catered. Further on, what do these numbers mean? If you only give them numbers, if you only give them data and statistics, it confuses the reader further. I think we have discussed this in our previous lectures as well, that just pure numbers will only confuse them further. We need a synthesis of information that we offer to them as insights. And then the last question about utility. What should I do with this information? Now that I understand the insight that has been offered to me, what do you want me to do? How should I actually put this into practice? All of these are questions that a reader has maybe before they pick up the document or while they are reading the document. So, that empathy with the reader becomes paramount for us as writers. When we are designing our communication, try to put yourself in the reader's shoes. As each sentence unfolds, as each detail grows and evolves, does it ask some further questions? Does it raise some more suspicion, some more doubt? Does it encourage the reader to think along with the information? All of these are important tactics to keep the reader's engagement intact and to ensure that their knowledge grows progressively, that they are not dumped with this entire bunch of information that they might not know how to navigate through. It is important that we reveal information more than offering it. Revelation happens step by step. Revelation is a progressive process. I hope that we understand when I say reveal, I mean that each aspect of information is logically linked with each other and is also answering progressive questions one after the other. My ground rule in that is that every piece of information should answer one question and raise one more. If you stick by this heuristic, it is possible that you may not lose your reader ever, because it is important that you satiate the reader's curiosity, but at the same time, you also ignite it. You are not only there to answer the reader's questions, you are also there to make the reader question better. That's how you acknowledge the centricity, the centralness of the reader within the writing process. Let's look at some examples. Before taking the reader's questions into account, the sentence might look something like this. Customer churn was 28%. 4 words, in fact 3 words and 1 number. But after taking the reader's questions into account, this is what the sentence might look like. Nearly 3 in 10 customers left the service last quarter, mostly those who hadn't logged in for over a month. This suggests a need for a re-engagement strategy. The insight is the same. It is just elaborated further, assuming the questions that the reader might ask. I would also like you to think about the questions that this sentence, the second one, is answering. Try to reverse engineer what the reader might be curious about, what the reader might be wondering if this is the answer. Let's move on to a spot of reflection. Think about the role of a marketing manager. At this point, I'm sure you would have assumed that this is a non-technical audience. Well done. What kind of questions might a marketing manager ask when reading a data report? How would you address those questions? Take some time, sit with a pen and paper, and note down what the role of a marketing manager dictates and what kind of questions will follow from that role, and how will you cater to those questions. It is important that we understand these principles not only as philosophies, but also as practice. Therefore, I would encourage you to reverse engineer the product that you would write for a marketing engineer and also think about the process. What kind of questions will you answer? Go a step further. What kind of questions will a marketing manager ask? Go a step further. What does a marketing manager actually do? That's the thinking process, which will ensure that your writing ensures the kind of quality and engagement that a reader is ideally looking for. Do this exercise, find some insights, and I'll get back to you with the importance of reader-centric writing in data science. So those were the first principles of reader-centric writing in data science. One of them we developed over time with our previous lectures and exercises and reflections, and the other I wanted to introduce a new outlook towards writing to you. That second part is something that we will address in our future lectures. So everything that we have built as a skill is the first principle. And the second one is the second first principle is what we will carry forward from here. For now, let me tell you about the importance of reader-centric writing in data science. Reader-centric writing is a direct extension of audience analysis. As you may have noticed, we estimate what the audience wants to know, and therefore, it results in reader-centric writing. If audience analysis helps us understand who we are writing for, reader-centric writing helps us act on that understanding. So all the tools, all the techniques, all the tactics that we need to ensure that we are working on our audience analysis and optimizing our writing to fit that audience, that's where reader-centric writing arrives. And that's an approach. That is the philosophy that we are approaching the next step of audience analysis with. For technical audiences, it means providing necessary details without any kind of redundancy. We have spoken about this in the previous lecture as well. Any detail that may be distracting for the technical audience needs to be necessarily removed, because the technical audience only cares about specific touch points in the journey of your analysis so that they know the rigor with which you have analyzed the data. However, for the non-technical audience, it means presenting the insights clearly and avoiding jargon. That's exactly the opposite of the technical audience. The technical audience may understand jargon and the non-technical audience would definitely not. We have spoken about this at length in our previous lectures as well. How do we connect the non-technical audience with the jargon-based concepts? You provide analogies, you provide first principles, you provide examples, and you provide utility. These are the ways to familiarize the non-technical audiences with a jargon-based concept without using the jargon. For stakeholders, it might mean aligning the findings with business goals and decision points. All of these are different audiences, and there is no one-size-fits-all rule. You have to augment your writing to fit each and every one of these different audience members, each and every one of these readers, to ensure that your writing is reader-centric. However, let me try and use the second principle on you, because I know that there will be some questions that arise out of today's lecture. You are my reader, you are my student. So, dear student, I know that some questions might have arisen from today's lecture as well. Let me guess a few of them. How do we actually do this? What are the strategies and approaches of doing reader-centric writing and ensuring that it is a core quality of our writing? I hope that I am correct in estimating the kind of curiosities that have come up in your mind. But rest assured, in the upcoming lecture, we will discuss the strategies and approaches of reader-centric writing, and I will try my best to acknowledge those questions and answer them, and maybe raise a few more so that we keep discovering the beauty of reader-centric writing as we go along. Remember, my job as the communicator is not only to answer the questions, but also to raise a few more. So, let's see how it looks like in practice in the upcoming lectures, and we will continue to cultivate that as an approach as we keep designing better communication for different audiences. That was it from my end for this lecture. We were discussing the introduction and the first principles of reader-centric writing. It is a philosophical approach that we are taking to a writing style that we have been developing in a piecemeal manner across the past lectures. In the next lecture, we will look at different strategies and approaches for reader-centric writing to actually put it in action and see what happens when that magic wand turns our writing into something worth reading. Until then, I hope that you stay curious. All the best in all of your learning. I will see you again in the next lecture. Thank you so much. Namaskar.